In this video, we're going to look at containers and game objects, the Unity lifecycle, how to do basic scripting, and how to make reusable components with prefabs. Okay, we're going to start looking at some of the more advanced scripting features in Unity. We'll begin by talking about the game object and a component. So the game object doesn't really do anything except act as a container to hold components. So components are attached to game objects, and these have actual functionality. So some of the examples of components are a camera, audio, colliders, etc. So here we're looking at an example script in Unity. You'll see the start and update functions. They are the most common methods that you will be using in Unity. Here we're looking at the documentation on the Unity website. You can see the list of events that are available in the Unity lifecycle. So here we're looking at the very beginning of the life cycle, and you can see that awake is the very first event that's run. So here I'm just putting in an awake function and adding a log message. And you'll see that when we run this, the message inside the awake will appear first in the debug console. And a couple other ones that are used often. One of them is late update, and this is called at the end of update. And another one is on became visible, which is called whenever the renderer is visible to a camera. And then on became invisible would be the exact opposite of that. It would be called whenever the render is not visible by a camera. So now we'll look at some basic scripting. The first thing we're going to want to do is just add an object to our scene. Here I'm using a 3D project, so I just added a sphere to the scene. And once that's added, you can add a script. I'm calling my script sphere script. And once it's added, you can double click it and open it up in an editor, and we can take a look. We'll be using the transform component to just move the sphere across the screen. Now we want it to move at a specific speed. And the performance of any computer system can vary, and we don't want the speed to be dependent upon the performance of a particular system. So we are going to use something called game frame independent timing. And we have a way to get the time that has elapsed since the last frame has been rendered. And we will implement this by referring to the class time, and there is a static property called delta time in there. So let's look at an example. Let's pick an arbitrary speed of 2. So we'll make a variable called speed, set it equal to 2. And then in our update function, what we're going to do is we're going to use the speed inside a transform component. And what we'll do, we'll just translate our sphere to the right using the x-axis, and we'll move it by 2 units during every update. And it'll move at a constant speed regardless of the type of system that it's on. So whether the computer is fast or slow, it should move at a constant speed. So we'll head back over to the Unity editor and run this and see what happens. And you can see that the sphere goes up. It does not actually go across the screen, so I will edit the script and move it along the x-axis instead of the y-axis here. And once the change is done, we'll head back over into the Unity editor, we'll run it, and it should move the sphere across the screen. So now what happens if we want to make lots of spheres? We don't want to have to create every single one of them and copy and paste that code over and over. So what we'll use is something called a prefab, and that lets us create an object once and then reuse it many times. So here we're back in the editor, and what we want to do to make a prefab is find the object you created, and we're going to want to click and drag it into the assets. And that creates a component down there. And then the other thing that happens is it turns blue up in the hierarchy, stating now that it is an instance of a prefab. And we can actually delete that object there, and you can see that the prefab still exists. So to use one of these prefabs, just drag it into your hierarchy and you can run it. And we see the sphere go across the screen. Now it's pretty much the same as before, but the difference is I can now add many of these into my hierarchy. And you can't really tell because they're right on top of each other, so I'm going to move them around so we can see them. And once we move them around into different spots, we can run it and we can see that they all now go across the screen. They're all reusing the same sphere prefab that we made. Now we can edit the properties of each individual sphere, like making one bigger or changing the scale like we're doing here, making it thinner, fatter, smaller, whatever. Or we can go and we can change the properties of the prefab and then change all of them. So we truly get that write once architecture. So we'll run it and we'll see that all the spheres pretty much act the same. The only difference is their starting position. And if we want to, we can change the scale or any other properties of just one of the prefabs and run it and see what it looks like. And that concludes this video. If you found this useful, consider subscribing and liking the video. We'll see you next time.